Okay, so this is the final video in my Wooden Heart dedication 10th anniversary videos about why and how this came into existence. I want to let you know I get a lot of personal. I get into a lot of personal detail in this about why it came into existence and what happened to me. If anything, I hope you find some kind of inspiration in it. It's not fun for me to talk about. I'm not proud of it, but there are parts of my life now where I want to discuss it, regardless of what happens and who it affects. This is the final video in the Wooden Heart 10th anniversary dedication videos regarding the process. I've showed you the entire anatomy of Pinocchio regarding the schematics book and the sculpture that I made of my life-size Pinocchio. I've gone over the production book. One of them, I had two process books. This is the only one I have left. One of them went missing somewhere around 2012 when I met Stan Lee. I mentioned that. And today I'm going to go over the panels on the final graphic novel, the final book from which came from all this process work. I just want to go through this really quickly and just discuss my thoughts on sequential storytelling and tell you where some of my inspirations came from when I was working on this around that time. 2007 was a very interesting year for cinema for me, movies. And there were a lot of movies that came out that year that very much inspired what I loved so much about movies, which was heavy fiction layered with heavy realism and the dance between the two. And still to this day, those movies that came out in 2007 are some of my favorites that inspired this. Mel Gibson's Apocalypto, Darren Aronofsky's The Fountain, There Will Be Blood, Paul Thomas Anderson's There Will Be Blood, and No Country for Old Men. These movies, it was such a great time for film and storytelling, and we were kind of exiting an era of dark, violent, real, fantastical lore and moving into more of a superhero world. That it's cool, but it's not really what inspired me to tell stories. So maybe that was part of the reason why that year changed me so much. The dichotomy between us as a culture exiting the dark and the real into super fantasy movies, but also it was my time where I was writing my first book. So the movies that were coming out that time made a heavy impact on me, plus what I was dealing with to go through writing my first book. So my friend Tommy Castillo, and when I got this published, I just got it published through an independent publisher. I was young, I didn't have access to publishing. And back then, self-publishing really wasn't a thing like it is today through Amazon or Barnes & Noble or some of the other things. If you didn't know people in comics or in publishing, you weren't getting a book published. It wasn't as predominant as it is today. So I had a friend, Tommy Castillo, who's no longer with us. May he rest in peace. He introduced me to his friend, Glenn, who had an independent publishing company, and we just made a deal for him to publish my first book and give me copies, and he had the ability to sell. It's easy to get a book out now, especially with ebooks. So Tommy Castillo wrote the foreword. Here was my interview with Stan Lee, or my endorsement with Stan Lee, and some of the photography in this of me in the Pinocchio sculpture was done by my professional photographer, David Jaffe, and I'm still friends with him today. There's my endorsement with James Gurney. James Gurney I met in 2007 at Ringling, and he told me to message him when the book was ready to be published, and I did. And we kept in touch. We had multiple phone calls. He's a good dude, and he sent me his endorsement. Here's another photo from Dave's photography shot of my Pinocchio shoot, the whole shoot with Pinocchio. There's my favorite drawing. Like I mentioned in my Anatomy of Pinocchio vid, I put it on the title page. And the reason why, let's say, The Fountain was such a big inspiration to me is because my initial concept, as I mentioned, was that I wanted this story to be centered around that tree, the man chopping the tree down to build Pinocchio from that tree. So it left a big impact on me. And the Mayan culture, going through the Mayan culture, the dynamic between this guy losing his mind into everlasting life, and then you had another movie, Apocalypto. Plus I did my illustration senior thesis down in Mexico, where I backpacked all through Mexico to document and paint and make video of those Mayan ruins. It's something that I wanted to do. I loved traveling, and that's really what set me on my journey to be an artist. So those films had a major impact on the panels, on how you see the story progress. As you notice, you see the establishing shots and the close-ups of this. The story is very, very structured and shot in a way that's very linear and legible and clear as we go through the beginning of the story. And as you start getting to the end of the book, it becomes more abstract and more surreal and more unbelievable because I was illustrating the stages of grief. I wanted to show that through the illustrations, watching a man slowly lose his mind into the grief of losing his family and then being buried by the tree, and having the memories of that, and going through the process of wanting to exit life. I love tragedy. I love Greek tragedy. I love Shakespearean tragedy. Most of my work is inspired by life tragedy. I haven't really had too good of I had, like everyone, we have moments in childhood where things were great, but my parental situation was such a disaster, and specifically with father-son relationship, it really wasn't there. So this book was very much inspired by my relationship with my mother regarding not knowing my father. And this was a very interesting concept when I was doing all the illustrations in the work in my children's book illustration class, because this was such a bizarre ass concept to create, the juxtaposition of Pinocchio and Christ. But because my story was based on chopping the tree down to recreate his son, the resurrection, the idea of playing God, the intervention of divinity in the form of a boy, and mad production of a wooden toy, that was such a profound drawing. And I felt stupid when I made this drawing of Pinocchio on the cross, but now I look at it, it's probably one of my favorite drawings in this book. I think it is my favorite drawing in this book, and I love that illustration. And it's in the back page in the Pinocchio schematics book. And in the 10th anniversary edition, you can see a lot of this cleaned up. There was so many things that just were not right about my first publication. The font isn't that great. I forgot to clean up some of these marks. My editor screwed up on one of the pages and did a double page spread. This wasn't supposed to be this way. There was supposed to be a zoom in on the nebula where he's losing his mind into this space. Again, this was very much inspired by Aronofsky's The Fountain. And I loved movies about trees. I love movies about space and celestial events, the sun, stars, supernovas. This is an iconic shot. This was the shot I saw in Del Toro's trailer when I saw it. I was like, dude, he blatantly ripped me off with this guy kneeling by the tree, grieving over his family, and then in the madness chops the tree down to build his son. And then there's this dichotomy of life and death outside of this more ethereal spirit realm. Now he's the interpretation of a living hell. This is the anger side of the stages of grief. So you're walking through the stages of grief. It's very hard to try to illustrate something like this with still imagery, or even though you're doing something sequential. And you see how I'm talking about, where it's very linear, it's very structured. The panels are very structured, but now you're starting to get into surreal, visceral things. It was the only way to truly capture something that was more on the grief side of it, because grief is illogical, passion is illogical, creating art is illogical. So I'm trying to eclipse all these different things. And again, I was going through a lot of issues with my own childhood and alcoholism while I was doing this. So there was a part of me that needed to do this. And just like I said in my previous video, I only write when I have something that I have to take care of in my own mind. I love this spread here, but watching watching the tree open. She replied, she moved, she spoke, she said, and it opens up like a vaginal birth canal. And it was a very tricky decision to reference the act of rape and using the tree as a vaginal birth canal, because it's such powerful imagery, and it can almost be deemed as grotesque by some, but it was important to show that the tree was, that when you get to the end and he starts hacking away at the tree, that this guy was stealing life out of this tree. And then I noticed her offering decaying fruit from her outstretched extensions connected to her limbs by the brachiocephalic artery. Her meager reminder, torn into my chest, burned into my mind. She opened her legs to me. The reference of the vaginal birth canal, the boy being brought out from the tree being used to recreate or give birth and resurrect a child. So the idea of activating the sense of rape. So I dug into her deep until she gave birth. It was a return of my son, a gift from the earth. It's a violent but subtle way to illustrate anger and grief, theft, rape. And this is how I was born. My mother was raped, and she lied to me about that. So that's where the abstract nature of rape comes from. Being forced against your will. And I don't know what that was like for her, but I always knew that there was a sense of resentment because I could feel the resentment from her. Not to say that she didn't love me, but my mother definitely neglected me. And when I found these things out, it all made sense. I remember calling my friend and talking to him about it, and he said that, yeah, it doesn't surprise him. It makes total sense why she always treated you the way that she treated you. And this is why I'm obsessed with tragedy and storytelling, because my life itself has somewhat of a tragedy. And by every metric of the miracle of life, I shouldn't be here. And this has also contributed to me having a lot of self-worth issues and alcoholism issues. It's not easy to deal with these kinds of things, and I struggled with it for a long time, and I think I kind of got a handle on it. But I deal with this issue in my next book as well, of the father-son motif, the abandonment issue, the neglect, and the idea of not knowing who your dad is or being abused in that way. So this is where this stuff comes from, and I want to end here on the final book. This is why I was so heartbroken and having lost my mind, having saw that trailer by Netflix and Del Toro, because I wrote this project from such a big personal place in my life, questioning my own life. So to watch another man win an Oscar for something that I wrote was psychologically and emotionally devastating to me. And I had to be okay with the idea that I would never get justice for that, simply because I did not have the resources to go after a triple billion-dollar company for what they have taken from me. They did not just take my property. They took from me my future, they took from me my present, and they stole from me my past. The experiences and the pain I went through, for which this story exists. A grieving man ascends a hill to chop a tree down where his dead family is buried to build Pinocchio from that tree. Okay, everyone, I hope you enjoyed that video. Yes, I got a little personal and honest about the reason why this book came into existence. And I always knew you can't be completely unaware when you go through some of the things that I went through. You just kind of know early on that you're being lied to, and your body has a built-in instinct to tell. So I don't know why I decided to make these videos and be that honest about my life. And the only thing that I can say is after I went through what I went through with the legal situation with Netflix and Del Toro, having stolen my work and trying to tell them how they got a hold of my book and what they tried to do to me. The mental breakdown was so cataclysmic in a way that it not only destroyed my sense of self-worth and a lot of my life for the past couple of years that I have to now rebuild, but it also stripped from me, I can't explain how, but it also stripped from me a level of insecurity and self-doubt and care to uphold a perfect image regarding my life and brand as an artist. I just don't, I don't give a fuck anymore about a lot of things, and a lot of it is because of this particular Netflix situation. When somebody steals from you something that is so personal, there's nothing in the world that will be able to rectify it unless that person comes out and owns up to the mistake. But I know Guillermo del Toro will never do that, because all he cares about is his brand and his corrupt Hollywood friends. So I have to live with this, and living with this means healing from it. I have to live with the rest of my life knowing that this man won an Oscar for a book I wrote about my mother and me being born from my mother being raped. And the only way that I know how to do that at this point, there's no books on how to deal with it. There's no therapy you can go through. There's no books on how to deal with it. There's nobody that you can talk to give you a DIY how-to on how to cope with being robbed by Hollywood corporate whores on your most personal and intimate works about your life. You just gotta cope, because they're never gonna own up to their crime. And the only way that I know how to do that is to start being honest. I can't hold this in anymore. I can't hold in Del Toro and Netflix lies. I can't hold in my mother's lies, regardless of who it hurts. And because I have hurt. And this is why I create the things that I create. I create the things I create not because of an overwhelming sense of artistic genius. I create the things that I create because my whole life I've been in a perpetual state of hurt. And the only way that I know how to deal with it is to create art. And my life, this point forward as an artist, I've had the conversation with myself and the thoughts of just about being more honest about how I think and feel. Because if I don't, I'm gonna go crazy. And what's the point of doing any of this if I can't talk about the reality of where the work comes from? I don't owe that to you or anybody, but I think it's important now more than ever, because it's just the way that the world is moving when it comes to artists and social media, and people want to know about people. They want to know what you're about and what you believe and how you feel, and it's not something that I choose to do, but I think it's necessary at this point. It doesn't make me proud sharing these things. It doesn't make me proud knowing that that's my origin story, that this is my origin story. But what does make me proud is the level of determination and tenacity and passion I have for creation to be able to overcome that. And I think at the end of the day, regardless of what you're going through, you have to find something about yourself that you do like, that you do love, or you will destroy yourself. And there's a lot of things about myself I don't like, that I don't care about, that I absolutely, genuinely despise about who I am. But the one thing I absolutely love about who I am every day I wake up in the morning is knowing that I have given everything that I can to pursue creating art and writing stories, and it saved my life. And I'm proud of myself even more to get to the point where I could talk about these things. I never wanted to prior. And maybe it's just because society requires us to get to know each other more through these platforms, to be able to support each other through the work. Maybe it's because when you're stripped of everything that you love after post-COVID lockdowns and economic decay, and you can't go outside, wear a mask, you're going to jail, or we're gonna basically rob the middle class blind and then steal your work if you refuse to surrender what you want to us for ridiculous contracts, then we're just going to take everything from you. When you have nothing left to lose, what left is there but to talk about these things? So I hope you found this informative and thought-provoking. This is my mission in life as an artist at this point, to just be more clear about why I create the things that I create and where it comes from. So that's about it for the wooden heart. There's one other thing I want to show you, which is a prop that I created, which was going to be part of the book. I created the tree from the story, similar to the way that my Pinocchio looks aesthetically with metal and wood. I never got to finish it because putting all the bark and stuff on the dead tree as it's spiraling. That panel I told you that I liked. Where you see the tree turning over and spiraling. And in the schematics, the tree that I drew like this, I tried to build it because I wanted to actually make some panels like this and shoot the glass with the carrot. I'm going to do that for the 10th anniversary. There's going to be a lot of more interesting work for the 10th anniversary. It's all in there. And I'm very proud of this edition. I'm very proud to have this book made it to that. So I hope you enjoyed these Wooden Heart 10th anniversary edition dedication videos. I'm very much looking forward for the book coming out, and I really appreciate the opportunity that this kind of a platform has provided me to be able to talk more deeply about why I create, not because of anything else, but because of a deep place of hurt, to find my own path in life. And it's just the reality of the situation. And if I could leave you with anything, it would be this. I started when I was very young, and I questioned everything. As soon as I was old enough to get a passport, I got a passport and I left the country and I started traveling, seeing the world and trying to figure things out. And the one thing that I came to a conclusion very early on in my life was that we look at people that fit the uniform of identity, that make it seem like they know what they're doing. But the reality is, there isn't a single person on planet Earth that has any fucking idea what they're doing. Everyone is just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks. And if that sticks, they go with it. And this is how I started out as an artist. I just wanted to create and express how I felt about this life. And I did a couple of shows and I completely sold out of work and I just went for it. It's like, okay, this is where I'm going. So if you find yourself in that position where you're lost and you're broken and you're hurting, just start, do something. Try to find your way through by doing something. And if you can wake up every day and find a little bit of time to do something that you deeply love that you can't live without, that's a start. I hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next video.